On this episode of Locked On Lightning, it looks like the Lightning are out on Barbashev, but no fear. There's other players in the crosshairs for the Bolts. We talk about those players and more, but first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'd like to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Tonight, we're talking about Tampa Bay Lightning, I guess, shifting gears. Now, it was reported earlier today by, or at least it came across my desk earlier today, that it looks as though that Tampa Bay, at least for the time being, is no longer in the running for Ivan Barbashev. And I will say this, that the whole thing that is going on with St. Louis right now, they trade away Tarasenko, they trade away O'Reilly, and now I saw something the other day on Twitter as well, and I don't know if this was from a credible source on Twitter. Now that we know the kind of the landscape that Twitter is these days, but I saw something. I don't, like I said, I don't know what the source was, but if this is true, this makes absolutely no sense. But the Blues possibly in on Patrick Kane, but I don't know. That would be very confusing. But what we do know for sure, or at least looks like it most likely is the case for the Tampa Bay Lightning at this point in time, that they are no longer in the sweepstakes for Ivan Barbashev, which, if you've been listening to the show for at least the last 2 weeks, if you're joining us for the first time today, well, congratulations. Welcome to the bandwagon, or welcome to Bolts Nation if you're just jumped in onto the hockey bandwagon, you want to pick a team. It looks like Ivan Barbashev, and I said this from the start, at least the last couple of weeks or so, as the trade deadline was or the trade moves, at least, if you want to call them that. I mean, we're still a little ways away from the deadline happening March 3rd. I said this every single day. I said I thought it was very important for the Lightning. Now, this is a year where they're not going to get, the high level guys, the guys that everybody else is looking after, the Tarasenkos, the Canes. I saw a headline on Daily Faceoff by Frank Cervelli, which was the perfect way to describe how the Lightning are in terms of what they have to deal out in terms of trade chips. And I'm going to quote him right here. The Lightning would like to be shopping at Gucci, but they got the wallet befitting of Walmart, which couldn't be any more true. And that is part of the reason why I really wanted the Lightning to pull the trigger on this deal as soon as possible. Because it feels like, especially with the Bo Horvat trade, that kind of expedited things for the trade market. And I've stressed it immensely that every day that goes by, the Lightning are kind of just getting closer and closer to the unfortunate reality that they're kind of digging themselves a hole to where they may not be able to get something done. And Frank Cervelli pretty much confirmed it on Daily Faceoff, that is what is happening with the Lightning in terms of, at least for the Ivan Barbashev. Now, that doesn't mean that they are completely out, that they have no other options outside of Barbashev. I did some scouring, around the NHL. I was comparing team records. I was looking at players that are on favorable deals, or players that teams wouldn't it wouldn't be a big to do if the Lightning were to call up these teams and say, "Hey, what do you want to do about getting a deal done?" And the two players that really stuck out to me, and one of these guys, pretty much his name's been floated around very lightly for the Lightning, if in the occurrence that they weren't able to get a deal done for Barbashev, and that was Sean Lafferty from the Chicago White Sox, totally different sport. Chicago Blackhawks center, could play the wing position, has speed in his game. Very good on the power play, which the Lightning have been really, really hoping that they could they could improve upon. Like I've said in the past, the Lightning. Listen, they are, and some people might get the wrong impressions when I talk about the Lightning, what their needs are, where they excel, where they fall short on this show. And the Lightning are a very good all around team, and I mean that is with them being oh so close to second in the Atlantic Division, where a month ago I don't think a lot of us would have guessed that would have been a thing, or that they would have been in shooting different distance of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that doesn't mean that they can't improve. My beef, I guess, if you want to say, with the Lightning, that with them all year long, is that as successful as they have been on the power play, my issue with them is that that number, if you were to just look at that without seeing, watching games and looking at game logs, you would expect that the Lightning are a good team, and they are on paper. But my main issue is that they're inconsistent. They go games where they shouldn't be, going 0 for 6. And that was what I was talking with a listener with. I don't know if it was on YouTube or Twitter, but my thing, what I was saying about this Lightning team, and it kind of fell into that, is that, this team is good. They're very good, but they have, just like every other team in the league, room for improvement. And Sam Lafferty, he's a good, I guess, fallback choice, if you want to call him that. I mean, I never want to look at someone, any player, whether it be in a trade deadline or even on the team, and call them a backup plan or whatever, because I feel like that's somewhat insulting to the player that is being spoken about. Sam Lafferty, in case you're curious about or have never heard of him, 27 years old, 50 games played this year, 10 goals, 21 points. My opinion, a very good, solid choice for a third line. And that's really what it is. I think, the two needs on this Lightning team are defensive depth and and forward depth, scoring depth. Sam Lafferty, I don't think he's going to be a huge addition, but I'm not looking for him to have some sort of a Nick Paul type appearance or performance on this team. I'm looking more for a guy that is able to be come in and kind of put out a performance of what we saw, like from Barclay Goodrow a couple of years ago when he was brought in. And I think that's what Lightning fans, if unless you are very realistic, I think that's where we need to measure the expectations, that as successful as Nick Paul was and set the world on fire, the chances of that happening are almost 1 in a million with a new player. But I like Lafferty. I think, everything I've seen with him, um, the everything that I've read about him, the thing that sticks out to me, which I really like, and I think could potentially down the road help the Lightning, especially in a playoff series. He has 4 shorthanded goals on the season, which is very impressive, which tells you that he has an eye for disrupting the play, and has that speed, like we discussed, going down the other side of the ice. So that's something Lightning fans should look at and think about, and look at it as positive. Uh, like I said, I think a lot of us would have preferred to get an Ivan Barbashev. but you always have to have some sort of plan A, plan B, or whatever you want to call it. And I think Lafferty is definitely a good plan B one. And I think the likelihood of a deal getting done with Chicago, um, I would probably, the percentage would probably be if Julian Brees-Boss hasn't already done so, calling up Chicago and say we want Lafferty, but obviously we don't have a lot to give you in terms of, we're not giving you first overall pick, we're not giving you number one picks, we're not giving you, I mean, we'll talk about what the Lightning can give back in a potential deal. But they're not getting back the return that we saw them get in the trade for Brandon Hagel last year. So definitely Lafferty, I would say, is probably a good plan B1 if the Lightning choose to do so and going after him and then striking up a deal with Chicago. In the upcoming segment, I will be talking about another player who I have very much liked over the last couple of years. A guy who I feel reminds me, if you follow me on Twitter, you know where I'm going with this, but a player that I feel can bring back some nostalgia in his play, um, if he were to come to the Lightning, and I'll explain more about that, and that is Tanner Jeannot of the Nashville Predators. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about today's sponsor. Now, they're the number one sports book in America, and that is our friends at FanDuel. Now, they are running a great deal right now because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. The Lightning are currently sitting at plus 1,200 odds to win the Stanley Cup final. And I like those. Those are the third best odds in the league. Excuse me, the fifth best odds in the league, with the Boston Bruins sitting at plus 500, the Avalanche, the Hurricanes at plus 700, and the Toronto Maple Leafs at plus 900. So Tampa, not completely out of it. Like I said, very good team, very good chance to get back to the Eastern Conference final. Like we've been saying the entire time, just need that extra piece to get them right back to the final. So definitely go in on that bet right now. And so don't miss that chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel. So once again, thank everybody for tuning in today's show. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Drop a comment below how you feel about Sam Lafferty, or do you like him, or would you prefer my alternative to him, and that is Tanner Jeannot. Now, you might be familiar with Tanner Jeannot as he has been a part of the Nashville Predators for the last 3 years. And he, you know what, and put in the perspective, let me just list off his numbers first to preface it. 81 games last year, 24 goals, 41 points, and on top of that, 130 penalty minutes. And you love to see it. Oh, and by the way, 5 of those goals were game winners. Honestly, the more I look at Jeannot, as much as I listen, if the Lightning make a deal within the next hour or, the next day for Lafferty, I'm fine with it. That's great. But Jeannot, I have to say, he just the numbers, and plus, I've been able to see him play a lot more than Lafferty. I have to say, I mean, he reminds me a lot. I'm getting Yanni Gourde vibes here. Now, is he going to play to the same level of success as that we saw from Yanni Gourde? that's a whole nother conversation for another day, and a conversation to be had if he were to come here. Now, this year, a little bit of a drop off, and you might say, 55 games played, 5 goals, 14 points, a little bit of a coming down to earth season. 83 penalty minutes, 1 game-winning goal. I don't mind it. I like it. I think that, we see it all over the NHL. We're seeing it with Ross Colton this year after having a good couple of years or a good year. I think that everybody goes through this, unless you're a superstar, which obviously, Tanner Jeannot is not, but we're not looking for superstars. We're looking for a guy to come in, contribute on the third line, a guy that could do a little bit of everything. And when I see Tanner Jeannot play, I think of Yanni Gourde, but a little bit of more beef on him. He is weighing in right now at 208, which is pretty good. 6'2". So, that he's able to go out there. And I mean, if the penalty minutes don't tell you otherwise, he goes out there and he's not afraid to throw his body around. He's not, and he has the ability to score. I don't see, the more I talk about it, quite honestly, the more I like Tanner Jeannot. I think that, and I'm not trying to pick on him, but I think he slides in quite perfectly into Nemestikov's spot. Now, saying that after Nemestikov just came off a road trip, which he scored 2 goals. I really like him. If you throw him on that fourth line, that's fine. But as I previously stated on the last episode, I don't really like the long-term idea of having Pat Maroon on that third line. If you bring in a guy like Tanner Jeannot, then you don't need to put Pat Maroon on the third line along Nick Paul and Ross Colton. I think a guy like that who has a little bit more knack of finding the back of the net, as Jeannot has proven he can. I think you bring a guy in like that who also has the ability to play physical, to play very well in all 3 zones. I think that you throw Maroon back down, and I think the only guy, if you want to switch him around with other lines, let's say Jeannot comes in and, he's not playing. It's taken him a little longer to figure out, which is fine. I think at the end of the day, if you're moving guys around, which we all know Cooper is going to do regardless of, just to give the other team different looks. I think that Corey Perry is going to be that guy. Like I said, not a huge fan of Pat Maroon playing above the fourth line. It's not a knock against Rig. It's just, I just don't think the long-term success, I'm not thinking about next game. I'm thinking about the playoffs when I say this. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, we got a long ways towards the playoff, but at the end of the day, isn't that what the rest of the season is from now until, game 82 is getting ready for the Stanley Cup playoffs, getting ready for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because like I've said, unless there's some massive, colossal meltdown by the Boston Bruins, which I think we could all agree at this point isn't going to happen, the more likely outcome, and I would say probably 98% or even 99% outcome, is going to be the Tampa Bay Lightning playing against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, you got to play every game as if this is a tune-up for Toronto. Now, you also might look at that statement and say, well, Adam, you know what? Isn't that how a team burns out? Isn't that how a team gets mentally exhausted before the playoffs? And we definitely don't want that happening. Well, that's why you rest guys. That's why you bring in guys like a Tanner Jeannot, like a Sam Lafferty, and you don't play your big guns as much. I mean, you're still going to play players, guys. You're still going to play the guys that you need to play in order to win on a nightly basis. But I think that, I mean, if hypothetically speaking, if the Lightning could bring in both of those guys, that'd be pretty awesome, I think, in my book. I would be pretty impressed to see how Julian Brees-Boss even makes that deal. So, if if the Lightning could do that, that'd be great. But more likely than not, we're probably going to see one or the other in the coming weeks. Hopefully, like I said, I wouldn't rule out, as much as disappointed as I would be, I wouldn't rule out the Lightning not really making a deal, because I don't think Julian Brees-Boss is going to make a deal for the sake of making a deal. So we'll see in the upcoming weeks for that. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, you put Jano in at that third line. You got him with Paul and Colton. I think not only does that help Jano down the line and get him acclimated, but that definitely helps Ross Colton start to pick things up, especially after scoring your goal the other night against the Anaheim Ducks. So wrapping things up on the show, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We are also available on the Odyssey app, so go ahead and do that. Subscribe to us on there as well. And like I said earlier in the show, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Drop a thumbs up, hit that notification bell, so as soon as the new episode comes out, you are notified of it coming out and you could listen. So wrapping things up, we've been talking very much lately, obviously, about Ivan Barbashev. Now he's out of the equation. You got Sam Lafferty still in the mix, kind of been low key in the mix for a long time. And then now we have the kind of the talk, sort of, at least for me, or the idea. And I'm sure Julian Brees-Boss has him on his radar, but Tanner Jeannot from the Nashville Predators, can the Lightning possibly get him? Nashville is kind of hanging on in the West, but not really. Sort of losing ground day by day. Now we're talking about the guys who are the Lightning gonna have to give up. That's been the biggest thing for me. Almost dreading as to whose name might pop up, in going the other way in a potential deal. Now, we've spoken a lot on this show in terms of the lack there of trade chips that the Lightning do have in their possession. We all know they've been swinging for the fences every single year since 2020, which is, you got to go for it. The window isn't going to stay open forever in Tampa Bay, so go for it. And so right now, looking at the biggest trade pieces, and when I say trade pieces, in the grand scheme of things, especially if I'm an opposing GM, I'm not blowing up Brees-Boss' phone over any of these assets, really. The thing that the Lightning could do, as much as it pains me to say this, if they were to make one last ditch effort for a high quality forward. Now, I said early on in the episode that the Lightning need a depth defenseman. I just, if anything, you just have Cal Foote ready to go in the wings. And I think the only move that may need to be made is you move Hedman down to the second line. And I know that sounds like blasphemy, but if you're looking for offensive production or any offensive production out of a defenseman, I'm sorry, it's not Hetty's year. You move Sergachev up to the first line, potentially with Bogosian, which is fine. So I don't know. I think scoring, obviously, you got to go with that. And I think, obviously, you're going to find better choices on the offensive side of things in a forward. But looking at trade chips, obviously, a first rounder, the Lightning's 2025 first round pick. The thing is that the Lightning have traded their first round pick every year over the last couple of years to get a deal done, and that's perfectly fine. It is coming out of it has been 3 Stanley Cup final appearances, 2 Stanley Cups, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But obviously, you have now depleted yourself of quality talent in the first round. So, and speaking of quality talent, the Lightning don't really have much of that. They do, but at the same time, like I stated in the last episode, the most you're ever going to see out of these guys, unless you see some, kind of Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov level emergence, which, quite honestly, no disrespect to these guys, don't see that happening anytime soon. Jack Finley, we've spoken about him. He was the Lightning's second round pick in 2020. The thing that I think is going to be a little bit of an allure to him for most teams is his size. He is 6'6", and he is a center. As we all know, in today's NHL, centers are a hot commodity and at the same time a scarce thing for some teams. So who knows? Maybe you could dangle that carrot in front of a team and get them to bite. The other names that pop to mind, really honestly, is Hugo Anafelt. Big goaltender, 6'3" Swede in the Lightning's developmental system up in Syracuse. He's got a save percentage of .923 in 20 games this year up in Syracuse. Now, obviously, as talented as he's been, and you could see that talent in the World Juniors, the chances are that he's never going to be able to get a fair shot with the Lightning as long as Vasilevsky's in net. So the Lightning should just trade him away and see what they could get back in the meantime. That's just how sports is, and maybe that's another trade chip. I don't think that Nashville would be crazy going after Anafelt, considering they have UC Saros as their franchise goaltender for the foreseeable future. Chicago, maybe, I think, would probably entertain that thought. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure what their goaltending situation in their minor league system looks like, but I think the guarantee you could have for any team that's in the middle of a rebuild is that most likely their goaltending situation is a dumpster fire. The other team that comes to mind, the only other team that comes to mind, unfortunately, we're probably not going to be able trading with a division rival isn't going to do anything, but Buffalo, one could dream, and then the other name that comes to mind, but I think that the return isn't going to be that much, is the rights to Isaac Howard. We all know what all the hype was around him, drafted by the Lightning this year, and tore it up with the U.S. developmental team, and now he's just having a disappointing season in his first year in college at Minnesota Duluth. So I think more likely than not, if not this year, maybe next year over the summer, we might see the Lightning trade him away at some point. I wouldn't be disappointed. I just think that, as kind of just a fun personality he looks like that he has, I just think that the Lightning, as much as everyone was excited to see what he did, who knows? Maybe Julian Brees-Boss will hold on to him for the future and see what how he improves in college. But at the same time, I think that if you're still trying to win and still serious about winning a Stanley Cup, you kind of have to shoot for the stars, and it doesn't only have to be for draft picks. So, if you're trading away some of your top prospects, and I use that term very lightly, considering the Lightning's minor league system isn't exactly good at the moment, you should do it, because it's like I said, these guys are talented players regardless, but at the end of the day, I don't see any of these guys ascending past a third line. So yeah, let me know in the comments below whether it be Jeannot, whether it be Lafferty. Is there a name that I have not mentioned on the show that you like? Do you still think that the Lightning are in it for Barbashev? Everything I've been hearing it seems like that ship has sailed at this point in time. Let me know, do you agree with the trade chips? Do you think that there's someone else in the minor leagues, or do you think that the Lightning should just not pull the trigger and look within? I was talking with a Twitter user, a Lightning fan on Twitter, saying I would wishful thinking would like to see the Lightning maybe take another stab at trying to elevate on Alex Barre-Boulet to the NHL level. I thought, in the limited time he had with the Lightning, I thought he played very well. And who else knows some of his teammates better? Some of these guys that are currently on the team better than Alex Barré-Boulet. So we'll continue to monitor the whole trade deadline situation surrounding the Tampa Bay Lightning as the deadline gets closer and closer and closer. And of course, break news if there is any to break. So in the meantime, that has been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you next one.